All praises to the Most High, Yahweh Bashem and Hawashai, Bahashem Racha Kodash. Double honors to the elder apostles and elder bishops of Great Millstone who rule well. Peace and salutations to the hopeful elect, scattered throughout the four corners of the earth, laboring in His truth in all sincerity. Isaiah 33 and 22. For Yahweh is our judge, Yahweh is our lawgiver, Yahweh is our king. He will save us. This will be the third video of a 7-part series titled 7 Symptoms of Babylon's Impending Doom. The first part centered around economic decline. The second focused on social and cultural decay. The focus here in the third installment will be political corruption and instability. So we often hear a phrase that says this country is built on Judeo-Christian values. So let's look and see what is meant by Judeo-Christian values. Judeo-Christian values refers to the set of shared ethical principles and moral foundations originating from both Judaism and Christianity, emphasizing concepts such as monotheism, the sanctity of life, the sanctity of human life, the importance of moral commandments like the Ten Commandments, the idea of divine order, and the concept of loving one's neighbor. These values, rooted in the Old Testament, are seen as foundational to Western culture, especially in the United States, though the term itself can be divisive and is sometimes criticized for being vague or used to promote specific political agendas. So basically, just from reading that first paragraph there, we can see how bogus that is because, since when has this country ever emphasized concepts such as monotheism, especially when you have "in God we trust" on a currency, or you have freedom of religion written into the Constitution. You have people who practice witchcraft and sorceries here, just to name a few things. And also, since when has this country respected the sanctity of human life? You have the right to choose issue being one of the most divisive issues in this country. Then you have, it also says the importance of moral commandments. But then you also do have the alphabet community running amok right about now. You have kids that can go to school and they're not even required to tell their parents how they choose to identify as far as their gender or sexuality. So the educational system is promoting that. And so when they talk about that, this country is built on Judeo-Christian values centered around like moral commandments, how is allowing a child to go to school and basically choose their own sexuality or gender, and they don't even have to tell their parents, how is that honoring thy mother and thy father? So you can see the hypocrisy in it already when you hear people say this country is built on Judeo-Christian values. That might be true. Judaism and Christianity is not, are not actually the concept of Judaism, the concept of Christianity, and actually what it is really not biblical anyway, so, but that's a whole other topic in itself. So maybe it is built on Judeo-Christian values, but according to what this definition here is, it's really not. So, also, now that I'm looking at it, it also says, divine order or loving one's neighbor. Where's that at in Babylon? Where can that concept of divine order or loving one's neighbor be found here in Babylon? So the only thing that's correct here is that the term Judeo-Christian values, it's used to push certain specific political agendas. So let's look at a chart here. And we're going to go back into Isaiah 33 and 22. So Isaiah 31 and 22 paraphrased basically says, Yahweh is our judge. Yahweh is our lawgiver. Yahweh is our king. And so as you can see here, this is the three-branch system that makes up this country: the legislative, executive, and judicial. So when you're reading Isaiah 33 and 22, Yahweh is our judge. That would be the judicial branch of the United States government. Yahweh is our lawgiver. That would be the legislative branch of our government, Senate and Congress. And Yahweh is our king. That would be the executive branch. So you can see that the way that this country is structured in terms of its three-branch government, it's a cheap ripoff, actually. It's a carbon copy of what Isaiah 33 and 22 states. Yahweh is our judge. Yahweh is our lawgiver. Yahweh is our king. So this is what they mean when they say this country is built on Judeo-Christian values. They take certain things out of the scriptures and they build their government, a corrupt government at that, using the scriptures. And this is, this isn't something brand new. This country is basically Rome. This is basically ancient Rome reincarnated. Ancient Rome had basically an identical governmental setup. So let's take a look at that real quick here. Yes, ancient Rome, particularly during the Republic, 509 to 27 BCE, had a government structured with three branches: executive, which were the consuls and magistrates; legislative, senate and assemblies; and judicial, consuls and councils. The position of Caesar refers to the rulers of the Roman Empire, such as Julius Caesar, who had immense personal power and could circumvent the republic system, eventually becoming a single, all-powerful executive figure. Sounds familiar. But let's get back into modern day Babylon. I just wanted to make the correlation that this present Babylonian system in America that we're living in right now. This is basically just the reincarnation. This is ancient Rome all over again. It's just bigger and badder, basically. So Isaiah 33 and 22 gives us a righteous rulership, a government under the divine guidance of Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai. The present three-branch system that we're looking at here, once again, this is basically set up and run by the elite. This is something that, if we look at Job 9 and 24, Job 9 and 24 basically explains this. The earth is given into the hand of the wicked. He covereth the faces of the judges thereof. If not, where and who is he? So just looking at that picture, though, with the executive, legislative, and judicial branches, we see that it is a carbon copy of Isaiah 33 and 22. And this is why you have political corruption and instability present throughout these three branches. You cannot properly run a government without the divine guidance of Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai. This is what the house of David will represent, the 144,000 being the governing body in the kingdom. But without that divine guidance of Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai, your government ends up with a lack of transparency. This is where you see things like certain politicians refusing to release certain files, whether it's about sex trafficking or assassinations. Without that divine guidance of Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai, your government ends up with secrecy within that government. And this was actually something that John F. Kennedy spoke about. And I'll just read his quote real fast here. Kennedy stated that secrecy is repugnant in a free society, emphasizing historical opposition to secret groups and practices. He believed the risks of concealing facts significantly outweigh justifications for it. And for the full quote, you can go to spiritofjefferson.com. That is what I'm reading there. But Kennedy spoke out about a shadow government that he felt was running the government here, and he got popped for that. So without that divine guidance, Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahweh Shai, there's a lot of oversight. There's a lack of oversight, meaning a single party or individual dominates the government with any real pushback, or even if there is pushback, there's going to be like feeble attempts at this point. Right about now, Nero is trucking through this thing. He's doing whatever he wants to do, and there's very few people who really can stop him. So at least not at this point. So you have a poorly run documentation process, meaning documents come up missing. You have people like Slithery Clinton, deleting something like 50,000 emails. You have the abuse of government resources by politicians, misusing money for personal gain and expenses, lavish trips, elected officials accepting gifts, elected officials becoming extremely rich, politicians who make between $150,000 to $250,000 annually, they're suddenly worth $50 to $100 million within a decade. And that's something that if you go into Proverbs 29:4, that comes up. A just king gives stability to his nation, but one who demands bribes destroys it. And that's basically what it is. You have a lot of politicians here, and they're being bribed. Basically, hey, we'll give you $2.5 million if you make this 45-minute speech for us, and you help promote and push this agenda that we want out there. And that's what happens a lot of times. People are literally getting paid millions to make speeches in front of these organizations like the UN, the WEF. They're making speeches and getting paid like $3 million. And so they're pushing certain agendas, and and they're just becoming rich. And so once again, Proverbs 29:4, a just king gives stability to his nation, but one who demands bribes destroys it. Then you also have suspicious contracts. The same companies repeatedly win new contracts, or a brand new company out of nowhere, they win a lucrative government deal, and I think Isaiah 7:3 gets into that. So Isaiah 7:3, both their hands are equally skilled at doing evil. Officials and judges alike demand bribes. The people with influence get what they want, and together they scheme to twist justice. I'll read that again. Micah 7:3. Both their hands are equally skilled at doing evil. Officials and judges alike demand bribes. The people with influence get what they want, and together they scheme to twist justice. And that is in the NLT translation. So on top of that, then you have what the so-called founding fathers' biggest fear was. And that was this country's executive branch succumbing to foreign influence, which is what we're basically already seeing, what we have been seeing, at least for the duration of my entire life. This country's greatest ally has immense influence over this country. You have lobbyists and special interest groups that have been pulling rank in the decision-making and voting process in this country for a while. So, and that's basically what your problem is right there in politics. There's just too much money involved. Politics should be, in all honesty, should be your regular people that live next door to you. Someone who lives right in your neighborhood. Those should be the people running for these offices. Once you start getting special interest groups giving corporations money and stuff like that, politicians start taking money, it's you've lost the integrity of the whole election process, if there ever was any integrity to begin with. But it's just way too much money floating around now. And so if I'm donating to a candidate $15 a month towards his campaign, and these are my issues, And there's 100 of us who are all donating 15, 20, $25 a month to this particular candidate's campaign. But then you have a Fortune 500 company who donates $50,000 a month, but they have their own set of things that they would like this politician to do for them. Who do you think that politician is going to cater to first? He's going to cater to that major corporation at that point. So this is why you hear a lot of people say voting doesn't matter. Your vote doesn't mean anything. There's just way too many lobbyists and special interest groups with all the big money in here that are pretty much controlling politicians. So, there's also a tax on accountability, basically meaning the news media and social media influencers, they get punished for going off a script. We just saw something major here last month, or maybe a little more than a month ago. I can't really remember, but there was an assassination at a college campus because someone went off script. Then there's electoral manipulation. You have a lot of voter suppression, election fraud. People have been dead for 20 or 30 years of newly registered voters. There's problems with the voting machine software, problems with the count. When did that start? I remember back in elementary, back in junior high school, when the voting polls closed, you have a presidential campaign. On election night, the voting polls close at about 10 p.m., 11 p.m. By the next morning, when you got up to start getting ready for school, you turn on the news, you already knew who the president was. That wasn't a long process to count the votes. All of a sudden, counting votes is taking a week and a half, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. They got to wait another month for extra mail-in ballots and stuff. It's so this whole thing is corrupt. You have the voting machine software. All of this stuff has been compromised. And so now you have actual foreign-born elected officials sitting in office. You have actual sitting officials who say that their allegiances are to their home countries, their countries that they are from. So you have taxpayer dollars that's literally being funneled into other countries. It's always been like that, but it's exponentiated now. It's much greater now. Whereas before, your money was primarily going to your greatest ally, and it was being sprinkled all over the earth as well. But now you have actual foreign people, foreign politicians, sitting in office that are taking your money, and it's going everywhere. So, and this is what the founding fathers were saying about, you don't want foreign influence within the ranks, especially at the executive branch, which is why they, most people in this country hate Obama, because they figured he was a foreigner, like not an Israelite foreigner, but just a foreigner, meaning he's not from this country. He should not be allowed to run for president. So when I'm saying foreigner in this regard, it's not meaning Israelite foreigners. I'm talking actual, the Gentile nations, the heathens. And that's what, the founding fathers didn't want. They didn't want other heathens beside themselves sitting here. You had to have been of Western European descent. That's who they wanted. Western European descent, Protestant Christians. They didn't even, that's why that was the whole thing about Kennedy. They felt that if Kennedy got into office, that the Pope would be pulling the strings. So the whole thing is they want white Protestant males in these positions. And the founding fathers' biggest fears of basically coming to fruition. So, you can see how this thing is going down. You can see it. And there's pretty much no denying this. I think it's at a point where there is no turning back now. You're not voting your way out of this. You're not going to vote your way out of this. It's just you're too deep into this now, especially considering you have a actual Supreme Court justice here. Now, this is the judicial branch. You have a Supreme Court justice who's actually saying she can't define what a woman is. And these are supposed to be the people that interpret the law. So at her March 2002 confirmation hearing, the then nominee, Ketanji Brown Jackson, was asked by Senator Marsha Blackburn to define the word woman. Jackson replied that she could not provide a definition in that context, stating, "I'm not a biologist." These are actual Supreme Court justices. So most people, still to this day don't see the big deal with it. You know, well, maybe I'm not being, or I don't know. Maybe that's inaccurate what I'm saying. I'm not going to say most people, but I will say there's enough people who don't care. All they see is, oh, she's the first so-called black woman that's sitting on the Supreme Court. They look at the symbolism behind that more than they look at her ideological beliefs. So if you have a sitting Supreme Court justice who's telling you she can't define what a woman is, we're at a point now where it's one thing when your average Joe Schmo liberal gets up there and says that, but this is an actual Supreme Court justice. And so when you look at Isaiah 33 and 22 again, this is why Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai has to be the lawgiver. He has to be the judge. He has to be the king. Man is incapable of running governments. We've seen this all throughout history. Man is incapable of running, of establishing a government that can run. You have to have divine guidance. That divine guidance is Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai. That is the whole purpose of Isaiah 33 and 22, to let you know that Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai is the legislative branch. He is the executive branch. He is the judicial branch. And you cannot run a government and put "In God We Trust" on the back of currency and then name that currency the almighty dollar. You're trying to replace the Most High Yahweh Bashem and Yahweh Shai with your own devices, and it's just not going to work. And that's why this country is going to fall. That's why this country is heavily divided right now. So let's take a look at Matthew 12, 25 and 26. I'll read this in the NLT, Matthew 12, 25 and 26. Yahweh Shai knew their thoughts and replied, "Any kingdom divided by civil war is doomed. A town or family splintered by feuding will fall apart. And if Satan is casting out Satan, he is divided and fighting against himself. His own kingdom will not survive." And as we know, Babylon is already in the light stages of martial law. We're hurtling towards civil war here in this country. And then on top of all of that, there's a government shutdown. So I was looking into this a little bit earlier, just trying to see where we are with this here. And I came across the history of U.S. government shutdowns. And it was pretty much nothing in here that I didn't know, that I had not already read from the last shutdown. But basically, a shutdown happens when Congress does not agree on a budget, so parts of the federal government have to close until spending plan is approved. They normally happen in October because the fiscal year runs from October 1st to September 30th. So I kept reading and would eventually come across what happens during a shutdown. During a government shutdown, non-essential federal services are halted or reduced, and many government employees are furloughed or placed on unpaid leave. Meanwhile, essential personnel such as military service members, law enforcement officers, air traffic controllers are required to keep working, often without pay until funding is restored. So I heard some people at work talking about this actually. And the theory that I heard was The Democrats shut down the government because Nero is using federal ICE agents to go into key districts to round up their potential voters. So, of course, that was the talk among some people at my job. And I just happened to come inside at work earlier today. Got a little curious about that statement. And this is what I came across. This is from Insider. Trump administration argues furloughed federal workers aren't guaranteed back pay. Federal workers who have been sent home during the government shutdown may not get back pay. That's despite a 2019 law that's understood to guarantee back pay to federal workers during a shutdown. A draft White House memo argues that the law doesn't apply to furloughed workers. Hundreds of thousands of federal workers might not receive back pay when the government reopens, according to the White House. So this dude, Trump, Nero, is not playing. This dude is wilding out. And basically, he can do that. They probably already got a whole AI, just artificial intelligence, ready to take these people's places already as it is. So nothing right now surprises me. Anything that happens right now, it just seems it could very well just all be coordinated. This is what they're doing, So they're trying to basically, I don't know. If you got a situation where federal employees, they're now saying they're not entitled to back pay, things can get real interesting here. Much sooner than a lot of people may have expected or been prepared for. But because there probably were some people who was like, okay, this may last for about 2 months. This may only last for about 3 months. This is what I got saved up. My significant other over there, he or she, that person, they have a job that they're not a federal worker, so they can hold it down for a little while. But now you're looking at like real hardships coming up for a lot of people if this is the case. And this was from Trump administration argues furloughed federal workers aren't guaranteed back pay. Insider today. This article just came out today, October 7th at approximately 10:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So this is going to hit the fan real soon here. And eventually they're going to have to do something to restore some semblance of order, because right about now, all Babylonian roads are leading to the MOTB, which is the RFID. So I'll close this out with Isaiah 33:6. And wisdom and knowledge shall be the stability of thy times, and strength of salvation. The fear of Yahweh is his treasure. I pray this has been edifying and reaches the ears it's supposed to reach. Shalom.